Harold Mitchell, a 72-year-old retired mechanic from Ohio, discovers that his life savings and family home, intended as his inheritance, have mysteriously vanished from his accounts. All evidence points to his daughter Sarah, the only person with access to his financial information. Confronting her with accusations of theft, Harold expects denial or excuses. Instead, what unfolds is a heart-wrenching revelation about family secrets, sacrifices made in silence, and the true meaning of inheritance that goes far beyond money. This story explores how assumptions can destroy relationships and how the truth, when finally revealed, can either heal or shatter a family forever. I stared at the bank statement in my trembling hands, reading the same numbers over and over again, hoping they would somehow change. But there it was, in black and white, $3,247.83. That's all that remained of my life's work, 47 years of getting up at 5 in the morning, working with my hands until they bled, saving every penny I could for my golden years and for my daughter's future. Just 3 months ago, that same account had shown $127,000. My house, the little 2-bedroom ranch on Maple Street that I'd paid off 15 years ago, was no longer in my name according to the property records I'd pulled up online. Everything I had worked for, everything I had planned to leave to Sarah, was gone. The worst part, I knew exactly who had taken it. My daughter Sarah was the only person who had access to my accounts. 2 years ago, when I'd had that mild heart attack, she'd convinced me to add her name to everything, just in case something happens, Dad. She'd been so caring then, so concerned about my well-being. She'd driven me to every doctor's appointment, made sure I took my medications, even moved back to Columbus from Cincinnati to be closer to me. I should have seen it coming. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was probably Sarah calling to check on me, like she did every Tuesday. How could she sound so normal, so loving, when she'd stolen everything from me? "Hi, Dad. How are you feeling today?" Her voice was bright and cheerful, the same voice that used to read me bedtime stories when she was little, and I was the one taking care of her. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I need to see you. Can you come over?" "Of course. Is everything okay? You sound different. If only she knew how different everything was about to become. "Just come over, we need to talk." I hung up without waiting for her response and walked to my living room window, looking out at the street where Sarah had learned to ride her bike, where she'd waited for the school bus every morning for 12 years. This house held every memory of raising her alone after her mother died. Every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every report card we'd celebrated, every teenage heartbreak I'd helped her through, it all happened within these walls that were no longer mine. 20 minutes later, I heard her key in the lock. She still had her key, of course. Why wouldn't she? She owned the house now. "Dad?" Sarah called out as she entered. She was wearing her nurse scrubs. She worked at Ohio State Medical Center, pulling 12-hour shifts in the cardiac unit. At 34, she'd never married, never had children. She'd always said her patients needed her too much, but I suspected it was really because she'd been taking care of me instead. "I'm in the living room," I called back. She appeared in the doorway, her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with concern. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired. She always looked tired these days. "Dad, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" I held up the bank statement. "This is what's wrong." Sarah's face went pale as she looked at the paper in my hand. She knew immediately what it was. "Dad, I can explain." "Can you?" I stood up, feeling every one of my 72 years in my aching joints. "Can you explain how my life savings disappeared? Can you explain how my house is suddenly in your name? Can you explain how my own daughter could steal everything I worked for?" The words came out louder than I'd intended, filled with a pain that went deeper than any physical ailment I'd ever experienced. This was the betrayal of trust, the shattering of the most important relationship in my life. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't let that affect me. Not anymore. "You stole my inheritance," I said, the words hanging between us like a wall. The money I saved for my retirement, for my medical bills, for emergencies, the house where I planned to live out my days. You took it all. Dad, please just let me. Let you what? Lie to me again? Pretend you care about me while you rob me blind? I was shaking now, not from age or illness, but from pure rage. How long have you been planning this? How long have you been pretending to love me while you figured out how to take everything? Sarah collapsed into the armchair. My armchair, I reminded myself bitterly, and buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs, but I steeled myself against feeling sorry for her. She was probably just upset that she'd been caught. I trusted you, I continued, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. When your mother died, I promised her I'd take care of you, protect you, give you everything you needed to have a good life. I kept that promise. I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations. I drove the same beat-up truck for 20 years so I could save money for your college, for your future. And this is how you repay me? Dad, stop, Sarah whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. Please just stop and listen to me. Listen to more lies. I think I've heard enough. I walked over to the mantelpiece, where a photo of Sarah's graduation from nursing school sat next to one of her and her mother at the county fair. Both pictures mocked me now, reminders of a relationship that had apparently been built on deception. I want you to leave, I said without turning around. I want you to get out of my house, excuse me, your house, and I don't want to see you again. Dad, no, please, get out, I shouted, spinning around to face her. Get out before I call the police and report you for elder abuse and theft. Sarah's face crumpled completely then. She looked like the little girl she used to be when she'd broken something valuable and was afraid of getting in trouble. But this wasn't a broken vase or a scraped car. This was my entire life, broken beyond repair. She stood up slowly, her legs seeming to barely support her. Dad, I love you. I know you don't believe that right now, but I love you more than anything in this world. What I did, there's so much you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You saw an old man getting older, getting sicker, and you decided to take what you wanted before I died and left it to you anyway. You couldn't wait for your inheritance, so you stole it. Sarah walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. Her face was streaked with tears, and for a moment, I almost weakened. Almost. The truth is so much more complicated than you think, Dad. But if this is what you want, if you want me gone, then I'll go. I won't fight you on this. Good, I said, though the word felt like swallowing glass. But I need you to know something, she continued. Everything I did because I love you. Everything. And then she was gone. The door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than if she'd slammed it. I stood alone in my living room, her living room, surrounded by 47 years of memories and artifacts from a life that apparently meant nothing to the one person who mattered most to me. The silence was deafening. I sank back into my chair and picked up the bank statement again. $3,247.83. That's what my life was worth now. That's what I had left to show for nearly 5 decades of hard work and sacrifice. But the money wasn't really what hurt the most. It was the betrayal. It was discovering that the person I loved most in the world, the person I devoted my life to protecting and providing for, saw me as nothing more than a bank account to be emptied. I thought about calling the police, filing a report, pressing charges. Sarah might go to jail. She'd certainly lose her nursing license. Her life would be ruined. Part of me wanted that. Part of me wanted her to pay for what she'd done to me. But another part of me, the part that remembered teaching her to tie her shoes, helping her with homework, walking her down the aisle at her high school graduation because her mother wasn't there to see it. That part couldn't imagine destroying her life, even after she'd destroyed mine. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the street, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Somewhere, parents were making dinner, helping with homework, tucking their children into bed. Normal families doing normal things, built on trust and love. I used to be part of that world. Now I was just a foolish old man who'd been conned by his own daughter. The house felt enormous around me, every room filled with echoes of happier times. Sarah's bedroom upstairs still had her old twin bed and the desk where she'd done her homework. The kitchen still had the little growth chart marks on the doorframe where I'd measured her height every birthday. How had it all gone so wrong? I must have dozed off in my chair, because the next thing I knew, the room was dark and my neck was stiff from sleeping at an odd angle. The bank statement had fallen to the floor, and for a moment, I hoped it had all been a bad dream. But when I picked up the paper and turned on the lamp, the numbers were still the same, 3247.83. The reality hit me all over again, like a punch to the gut. I was alone now, truly alone for the first time since Sarah was born. I had no family, no money, and apparently no home that I could really call my own. At 72 years old, I was starting over with nothing. The phone rang again, and I saw Sarah's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. Then, it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. "Dad, thank God." Sarah's voice was thick with tears. "I've been so worried. Please, I'm begging you, just give me 5 minutes to explain. 5 minutes. And then if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that." I wanted to hang up. I wanted to stick to my decision to cut her out of my life completely. But something in her voice, a desperation I'd never heard before, made me hesitate. 5 minutes, I said finally. "But not tonight. I can't do this tonight. Tomorrow then. Can I come over tomorrow?" I closed my eyes, feeling older than I ever had in my life. Tomorrow. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of what used to be my living room, wondering if I was making a mistake. What could Sarah possibly say that would explain away the theft of my entire life savings? What excuse could justify stealing the roof over my head? But despite everything, despite the anger and betrayal and heartbreak, she was still my daughter. She was still the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap while I watched baseball games. She was still the young woman who'd held my hand in the hospital when the doctors thought I might not make it. Maybe I owed her 5 minutes. Maybe I owed myself the chance to understand how everything had gone so terribly wrong. As I finally made my way upstairs to bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked like what I was, a broken old man who'd just discovered that the person he trusted most in the world had betrayed him in the cruelest way possible. Tomorrow, Sarah would try to explain herself. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide whether to forgive the unforgivable or lose my daughter forever. But tonight, all I could do was lie in my bed and wonder how the hell I'd ended up here. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face when I'd accused her of stealing from me. The tears, the desperation in her voice, the way she'd looked like I'd physically struck her. But then I'd remember the bank statement, the property records, and the anger would surge back through me like electricity. By 6 in the morning, I was already dressed and sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I'd been thinking all night about what Sarah could possibly say to justify what she'd done. Maybe she'd claim she was protecting the money from scammers. Maybe she'd say she was investing it for me. Maybe she'd just break down and admit she needed the money for something. Gambling debts, medical bills, who knows what. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation that would make this right. You don't steal from your own father. You don't take away an old man's security and independence. You don't destroy the trust that's supposed to be sacred between parent and child. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. Sarah had always been punctual, even as a little girl. Another trait she'd inherited from her mother. I opened the door to find her standing on my porch. Her porch, I reminded myself, looking like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red and swollen, her usually perfect hair was messy, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. In her hands, she held a manila folder thick with papers. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said quietly. I stepped aside to let her in, but I didn't offer her coffee or ask her to sit down. This wasn't a social visit. "You said 5 minutes," I reminded her. "Start talking." Sarah walked into the living room and set the folder down on the coffee table. She took a deep breath, and when she looked up at me, I saw something in her eyes I couldn't quite identify. Not guilt, exactly. Something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "Dad, Before I explain anything, I need you to know that I never intended for you to find out this way. I was going to tell you everything, but I was waiting for the right time, and I guess there never was going to be a right time. So you admit it, I said, crossing my arms. You did steal my money. I moved your money, yes, and I transferred the house deed. But Dad, I didn't steal anything. She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. I need to show you something. Actually, I need to show you a lot of things. She held out what looked like medical records. Do you remember when you had that dizzy spell 3 months ago? When you fell in the garage? I remembered. I'd been working on my old Chevy when suddenly the world started spinning. I'd grabbed onto the workbench to steady myself, but my legs had given out, and I'd ended up on the concrete floor. Sarah had found me there 20 minutes later when she'd come by to bring me groceries. You said it was just low blood sugar, I said. That's what I told you because I didn't want you to worry. But Dad, that wasn't low blood sugar. That was a minor stroke. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. What? Dr. Morrison confirmed it with the brain scans. You had what's called a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke, and the tests showed that your condition is progressing faster than we'd hoped. My legs suddenly felt weak, and I sank into my armchair without thinking. What condition? What are you talking about? Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Dad, you have early-stage dementia. We've known for over a year now. You were diagnosed right after your heart attack, but you made me promise not to tell anyone. You said you'd rather die than end up in a nursing home not knowing who you were. The room seemed to tilt around me. This couldn't be true. I would remember being diagnosed with something like that. I would remember, but even as I thought it, I felt a cold chill of recognition. There had been tests, lots of tests after the heart attack, and there had been that appointment with a specialist that I'd been strangely reluctant to think about afterward. The papers in your folder, Sarah continued, they're not just medical records. They're legal documents, power of attorney papers that you signed when you were lucid, when you understood what was happening to you. You made me promise to take care of your finances and your property when you could no longer do it safely yourself. She pulled out another document. This is from your financial advisor, Mr. Peterson. He'd been calling you for months about some investment decisions you'd been making. Dad, you'd been giving money to phone scammers. In the past 6 months, you'd lost almost $30,000 to fake charities and bogus investment schemes. I stared at the paper in her hands, trying to process what she was saying. Phone calls. There had been phone calls from people saying I'd won prizes or asking for donations to veterans organizations. But those had been legitimate, hadn't they? The house transfer, Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. That wasn't theft either. That was protection. You'd been getting calls from people claiming to be from the county assessor's office, saying you owed back taxes. You were about to write them a check for $15,000 before I stopped you. Dad, you don't owe any back taxes. The house is paid off and current on all taxes. But in your confusion, you were about to hand over thousands of dollars to criminals. My head was spinning. None of this made sense. I would remember these things. I would remember being diagnosed with dementia. I would remember signing legal documents. Wouldn't I? Show me, I said quietly. Show me the diagnosis. Sarah handed me a medical file with my name on it. Inside were brain scans, test results, and a report from Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a neurologist at Ohio State. The date was 18 months ago. The diagnosis was clear: early onset Alzheimer's disease with mild cognitive impairment. As I read the report, fragments of memory started coming back. Sitting in Dr. Chen's office, Sarah holding my hand, the doctor explaining something about plaques and tangles in my brain. My own voice sounding far away, saying, "Don't tell anyone. Promise me you won't tell anyone." "You made me swear," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face now. "You said you'd rather people think I was a thief than know you were losing your mind. You said you couldn't bear the idea of people looking at you with pity, treating you like you were already gone." I looked up at her, and suddenly I could see past the present moment to other moments. Sarah coming over more frequently, Sarah insisting on going to the bank with me, Sarah gently taking financial documents out of my hands and saying she'd take care of the paperwork. I thought she was just being helpful. I thought she was being a good daughter. The money, I whispered. Where is the money? Sarah pulled out bank statements, not the one I'd been looking at yesterday, but others. Accounts I didn't recognize. It's all here, Dad. Every penny. I moved it to protected accounts that the scammers can't access. Accounts that require 2 signatures for withdrawals. The money is safe. She showed me the statements. There it was, $127,000 spread across 3 different accounts, all bearing my name along with hers. And the house? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. It's in a trust. You're the primary beneficiary and have the right to live here for the rest of your life, but it's protected from scammers, from creditors, from anyone who might try to take advantage of your condition. You can't lose it, no matter what anyone might try to convince you to do. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to reconcile what I thought I knew with what I was learning. The betrayal I'd felt so certain of yesterday was crumbling, replaced by something much more complicated and painful. How long? I asked. How long have I been forgetting things? Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It started small. You'd forget appointments or tell me the same story 3 times in one conversation. Then you started having trouble with numbers, with managing your checkbook. The phone scammers. Dad, they target people exactly like you. People who are starting to lose their cognitive abilities but don't realize it yet. If this part also touched your heart, tell me from which part of the world you're listening to this story. The pain of watching a parent struggle with memory loss is something families everywhere understand, no matter where they are. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Why didn't you explain what was happening? Sarah's face crumpled. Because you forgot, Dad. Every time I tried to remind you about the diagnosis, every time I tried to explain why I was helping with your finances, you'd get angry. You'd accuse me of treating you like a child, or you'd insist that nothing was wrong with you. And then the next day you'd forget we'd even had the conversation. The weight of what she was telling me settled over me like a heavy blanket. All the anger I'd felt, all the accusations I'd made, all the pain I'd caused my daughter by calling her a thief. Yesterday, I said slowly, when I confronted you about the money, had we talked about this before? Sarah nodded miserably. Many times. I have a folder of notes at home, documenting every conversation we've had about your condition, every explanation I've given you about why I moved your assets. Some days you understand and thank me for protecting you. Other days, she gestured helplessly. Other days I accuse you of stealing from me. Yes, I buried my face in my hands, overwhelmed by shame and confusion and a grief I couldn't quite name. How could I not remember being told I had dementia? How could I not remember my own daughter explaining that she was trying to help me? But even as I wondered, I realized that this felt familiar somehow. The medical records, the legal documents, even Sarah's patient explanations, they all triggered a sense of déjà vu, like echoes of conversations I couldn't quite grasp. I'm scared, I admitted, the words coming out broken and small. Sarah was beside me in an instant, kneeling next to my chair like she used to do when she was little and wanted to tell me a secret. I'm scared too, Dad. I've been scared for months, scared of watching you disappear bit by bit, scared of making decisions for you that you might hate me for, scared that one day you'll forget who I am entirely and think I really am just someone who's trying to hurt you. I reached out and touched her face, this daughter who had been protecting me while I accused her of betraying me. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I called you a thief. I'm sorry I told you to leave. You didn't know, she whispered. The disease, it's not your fault, Dad, but it felt like my fault. It felt like I was failing at the most basic requirement of being human, remembering my own life. What happens now? I asked. Sarah sat back on her heels and wiped her eyes again. Now we figure out how to move forward. Together. Dr. Chen says you could have good days and bad days for years still. On the good days, you're still yourself. On the bad days, we'll handle those as they come. And you'll keep taking care of the money, the house, only if you want me to. Only if you trust me to. I looked at this young woman who had sacrificed so much to protect me from my own failing mind, who had endured my accusations and anger and confusion with patience I didn't deserve, who had kept my secret even when it meant letting me think she was a criminal. "I trust you," I said. "I trust you completely." "And Sarah?" "Yes, Dad. Thank you. Thank you for protecting me even when I didn't understand what you were doing." She smiled through her tears, and for a moment, she looked exactly like her mother. "I love you, Dad. No matter how confused things get, no matter what you forget or remember, I will always love you." As I held my daughter's hand in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of a truth I couldn't always remember, I realized that inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about love. It's about the willingness to care for someone even when they can't care for themselves. It's about making sacrifices that go unrecognized and unappreciated. Sarah hadn't stolen my inheritance. She had become it. The days following Sarah's revelation blurred together in a haze of doctor's appointments, legal consultations, and difficult conversations. She had insisted on taking time off from the hospital to help me process everything. And for the first time in months, I was grateful for her constant presence rather than feeling smothered by it. We sat in Dr. Chen's office on a Tuesday morning, the autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of the neurology clinic at Ohio State. The doctor was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, and she spoke to me with the same gentle directness that Sarah had inherited. "Mr. Mitchell, how are you feeling about everything we've discussed?" Dr. Chen asked, her hands folded on her desk. I looked down at the medical records spread between us. Brain scans showing the telltale signs of deterioration, cognitive test results that painted a picture of decline I was only beginning to understand. "Confused," I admitted, "and angry." "Not at Sarah," I added quickly, glancing at my daughter. "Angry at this disease. Angry at my brain for betraying me." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's completely normal. Many patients experience something called anosognosia, a lack of awareness of their own condition. It's not denial, Mr. Mitchell. It's actually a symptom of the disease itself. Your brain is protecting you from fully understanding what's happening to it. So when I forgot about my diagnosis, when I couldn't remember signing those legal documents, that wasn't stubbornness or denial. That was the Alzheimer's literally preventing you from retaining that information. Your brain was filtering out what it perceived as threatening or overwhelming." Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's why you kept getting so angry when I tried to explain. Your mind was protecting you from a truth it couldn't process." The weight of understanding settled over me like a lead blanket. All those times I'd accused Sarah of treating me like a child, all those moments I'd felt frustrated and confused by her overprotective behavior. She'd been living with the knowledge of my condition while I remained blissfully, cruelly unaware. "How long do I have?" I asked Dr. Chen. Before I'm not me anymore?" "Doctor." Chen exchanged a look with Sarah. "That's impossible to predict with certainty. Some patients maintain their core personality and memories for many years. Others progress more rapidly. What I can tell you is that you're still in the early stages. You have time. Time for what? Time to make plans, time to have important conversations, time to create safeguards for when things become more difficult." She pulled out a pamphlet. "There are support groups, both for patients and families. There are legal preparations to consider, medical directives to establish, and there are treatments that can help slow the progression." As we left the doctor's office, Sarah was quiet, too quiet. I could see the weight she'd been carrying alone for so long, and it broke my heart all over again. "Coffee?" I suggested, pointing to a small cafe across from the medical center. We found a corner table, and I watched Sarah stir her latte absently, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Talk to me," I said. "What are you thinking about?" She looked up, and I saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I'm thinking about how relieved I am that you finally know, and how terrified I am of what comes next." "Tell me about the terrified part." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Dad, do you know how many times we've had this conversation? Do you know how many times you've learned about your diagnosis for what felt like the first time?" I shook my head, though I was beginning to suspect the answer would hurt. 7 times. This is the 8th. And each time you're shocked and angry and scared. And then a few days or weeks later you forget again. And I have to watch you go through the same pain over and over. And I can't protect you from it. The coffee cup felt heavy in my hands. Will I forget again this time? Maybe. Probably. Dr. Chen says it's likely, especially as the disease progresses. You might remember bits and pieces, or you might wake up tomorrow thinking I've stolen from you again. I thought about this, trying to imagine living in a world where the most important truths kept slipping away like water through my fingers. That must be hell for you. It is, she admitted, but it's worse for you. Every time you forget, every time you have to learn this again, it's like losing a piece of yourself. And I have to watch it happen and pretend it's the first time, because getting angry or frustrated only makes it harder for you. I reached across the table and took her hand. How have you been doing this alone? Why didn't you tell anyone else? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because you made me promise not to. You said you'd rather people think I was a terrible daughter than know you were losing your mind. You said if I told anyone, your friends at the garage, the neighbors, anyone, you'd never forgive me. The cruelty of my own requests hit me like a physical blow. In trying to protect my pride, I'd isolated my daughter and forced her to bear this burden in complete silence. What about your job? Your life? You moved back from Cincinnati, you're working extra shifts to pay for things I can't manage anymore. Dad, stop. Sarah's voice was firm. You raised me by yourself after Mum died. You worked 2 jobs to put me through nursing school. You never complained, never made me feel like a burden. Now it's my turn to take care of you. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. The dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The fact that at 34, she was spending her evenings managing her father's medications instead of building a life of her own. Sarah, I want you to tell people. I want you to tell your friends, your colleagues, whoever you need to tell. I don't want you doing this alone anymore. She looked surprised. Are you sure? Last time I was scared and stupid and selfish. This time I'm thinking clearly and I'm telling you, get help, get support. Don't sacrifice your entire life for my pride. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the bustle of medical students and hospital staff rushing past the cafe windows. Finally, Sarah spoke again. There's something else we need to talk about. Something practical. What's that? Your truck. Dad, you can't drive anymore. Dr. Chen's report specifically states that your reaction time and judgment are compromised. I've been hiding your keys. I felt a flash of the old anger, the indignation at being treated like a child. But then I forced myself to think rationally. How many times had I gotten confused lately while driving? How many times had I found myself in my truck without remembering how I'd gotten there? Have I had any accidents? Sarah bit her lip. Small ones. You backed into Mrs. Peterson's mailbox last month. You got lost coming home from the grocery store and ended up 20 miles away in Delaware. The police found you parked on the side of the highway, completely confused about where you were. Another piece of memory I'd lost to the disease. Another moment of terror for my daughter that I couldn't even remember experiencing. Okay, I said. No more driving. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. When you take things away from me, my keys, my independence, I need you to explain why. Even if I forget, even if we have to have the same conversation multiple times, don't just hide things from me. I may have dementia, but I'm still a person. You're right. I'm sorry. I was so focused on keeping you safe that I forgot about keeping you informed. As we drove home, Sarah driving, me in the passenger seat where I'd apparently need to get used to sitting, I found myself really looking at the familiar streets of my neighborhood for perhaps the first time in months. How many details had I been missing? How many changes had occurred while my brain was too compromised to notice? Where are you watching this story from? I'd love to know which city you're joining me from as we navigate these difficult family moments together. When we pulled into the driveway, Mrs. Henderson from next door was getting her mail. She waved and walked over to the car. Harold, how are you feeling? Sarah told me about your health issues. I looked at Sarah in confusion. She gave me a small, apologetic smile. I had to tell her, Dad. She was asking questions about why I was here so much and when the police brought you home that day. Mrs. Henderson continued, my late husband had dementia too. If you ever need anything, groceries, someone to sit with Harold while you run errands, just let me know, dear. The kindness in her voice caught me off guard. I'd expected pity, the careful way people talk to someone they think can't understand them. Instead, she was offering practical help and treating me like I was still a person worth caring about. Thank you, Eleanor, I said. That means more than you know. As we walked into the house, I realized that my fear of people knowing about my condition had been based on pride and assumptions that were probably wrong. Most people, like Mrs. Henderson, had experience with this disease. Most people understood that having dementia didn't make me less human. That evening, Sarah and I sat in the living room going through photo albums. She'd started doing this regularly, she explained, because pictures often help trigger memories that were beginning to fade. Tell me about this one, she said, pointing to a photo of her at about age 10, standing next to a partially restored 1967 Mustang. I smiled, and the memory came back clearly. That was the summer I taught you to change oil. You were so determined to learn everything I knew about cars. You got grease all over your new school clothes, and you were so proud of it. I wanted to be just like you, Sarah said softly. I wanted to fix things and make them work again. And now you do. You fix people instead of cars. I'm trying to fix you too, Dad. I looked at this remarkable woman who'd grown up to be everything I'd hoped for and more, who'd put her own life on hold to protect mine, who'd endured my accusations and confusion and fear with a patience I didn't deserve. Sarah, you're not trying to fix me. You are fixing me. Every day that you help me understand what's happening, every time you explain things patiently instead of getting frustrated, every decision you make to keep me safe, you're fixing the parts of my life that I can't fix myself. But I can't fix the disease, Dad. I can't make your brain better. No, but you can make sure I'm not alone with it. You can make sure I'm safe and cared for and loved. That's more than fixing, sweetheart. That's saving. As I prepared for bed that night, I wrote myself a note and left it on my bedside table. Sarah loves you. Sarah is protecting you. You have dementia, but you are not alone. I didn't know if I'd remember any of today's revelations when I woke up, but at least I'd have a reminder of the truth. The truth that my daughter hadn't stolen my inheritance. She'd become my guardian angel. I woke up to the sound of Sarah making breakfast downstairs, and for a moment everything felt normal. Then I saw the note I'd left myself on the bedside table, and reality came crashing back. Sarah loves you. Sarah is protecting you. You have dementia, but you are not alone. The handwriting was definitely mine, but I had no memory of writing it. Had I forgotten again? Had yesterday's revelation already slipped away into the fog that seemed to be claiming more and more of my mind? I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the note, trying to piece together what I could remember. There were fragments. Sitting in a doctor's office, looking at brain scans, Sarah crying. The emotions were there even if the details were fuzzy. Fear, shame, relief, love. They felt fresh and real, even if I couldn't quite grasp why. Dad? Sarah's voice came from downstairs. Breakfast is ready. I made my way to the kitchen, where Sarah had laid out my medications next to a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She looked up at me hopefully. How are you feeling this morning? Do you remember our conversation yesterday? I held up the note. Pieces. I remember you explaining that you moved my money to protect me. I remember being in the doctor's office, but it feels distant, like something I dreamed rather than lived. Sarah's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly. That's okay. That's normal, according to Dr. Chen. The important thing is that you're not angry with me. No, I'm not angry. I sat down at the table and looked at the pill organizer next to my plate. 7 days worth of medications sorted into morning, afternoon, and evening compartments. Did I used to manage all this myself? You tried to, but you were missing doses or taking them twice. Last month, I found you taking your blood pressure medication 4 times in one day because you couldn't remember if you'd taken it already. Another piece of my independence that had slipped away without me noticing. What else have I been? What else can't I do anymore? Sarah sat down across from me with her own cup of coffee. She looked tired, but there was something different about her today. A kind of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Well, you can't drive anymore. We talked about that yesterday, and I've been managing your bills and appointments because you were getting confused by the paperwork. But Dad, there's still so much you can do. You can still tell me stories about Mom that I've never heard. You can still fix my leaky faucet faster than any plumber. You still beat me at chess more often than not. Chess? I looked at her in surprise. We play chess every Sunday afternoon for the past 6 months. You taught me when I was little, and I finally got good enough to give you a real game. She paused. You don't remember? I shook my head, feeling another piece of my present slide away from me. How many moments like this was I losing? How many connections with my daughter were disappearing into the void where my memories used to live? It's okay, Sarah said quickly, seeing my distress. We can play today. Maybe it'll come back to you. After breakfast, Sarah suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood. Dr. Chen says exercise and fresh air are good for your brain, she explained. And I thought maybe seeing familiar places might help with your memory. We walked slowly down Maple Street, past houses I'd looked at for 25 years. Mrs. Chen was working in her garden, and she waved as we passed. Mr. Rodriguez was washing his car in his driveway. The Petersons' new dog, when had they gotten a dog, barked at us from behind their fence. Everything looked the same, but I felt like a stranger visiting someone else's life. Tell me about the neighbors, I said to Sarah. Tell me things I might have forgotten. Sarah smiled. Well, Mrs. Chen grows the most amazing tomatoes. Every summer she brings us bags full of them, and you always tell her the same joke about how her tomatoes are so good they should be illegal. What's the joke? You say, Eleanor, these tomatoes are so perfect, they must be on steroids. Have you been taking them to the gym? Sarah laughed. It's terrible, but she always laughs anyway. I tried to picture myself making this joke, tried to feel the familiarity of the interaction, but it was like reaching for something in the dark. And Mr. Rodriguez, Sarah continued, he's been restoring that Camaro in his garage for 3 years now. You've been helping him with the engine work. He says you're the best mechanic he's ever met. I help him. This surprised me. I didn't remember knowing Mr. Rodriguez well enough to work on his car. Every Saturday morning, you two spend hours in that garage, covered in grease and arguing about carburetor settings. His wife makes you both lunch, and you come home happy and tired and smelling like motor oil. As we walked, Sarah continued painting pictures of a life I couldn't quite remember living. Apparently, I'd become something of a neighborhood grandfather figure, helping with car troubles, home repairs, and offering advice to young parents. I had a routine, relationships, a place in this community that felt both foreign and familiar. We stopped at the small park at the end of our street where Sarah and I used to come when she was little. The playground equipment was different now, newer and more colorful, but the big oak tree where we used to have picnics was still there. Do you remember teaching me to ride a bike here? Sarah asked, sitting down on one of the benches. I closed my eyes and concentrated. Yes, there was something. A little girl with pigtails wobbling on a too-big bicycle. My hands on the back of the seat running alongside her, promising not to let go. The moment when I did let go and she kept riding, her delighted laughter echoing across the park. I remember, I said, and I really did. You were so determined. You fell about 20 times, but you kept getting back up. You said, Daddy, I'm going to keep trying until I get it right. That's right. Sarah's face lit up. And when I finally rode all the way around the path by myself, you cheered so loud that other families came over to see what was happening. For a moment, sitting in that park with my daughter, I felt like myself again. The fog lifted, and I could see clearly both the past and the present. I understood what was happening to me. I could remember the conversations we'd had, and I felt connected to the life I was living. This is what Dr. Chen meant about good days and bad days, isn't it? I said. Sarah nodded. Some days you're completely yourself. Other days it's like you're lost in a maze and I can't find you. And some days, like today, You're somewhere in between. What are the bad days like? For you, I mean. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching a young mother push her toddler on the swings. The bad days are when you don't recognize me at first, when you think I'm a stranger in your house, or when you get scared and confused and nothing I say helps. The bad days are when you ask me where Mom is, and I have to remind you that she died, and you grieve for her all over again like it's the first time. The weight of what my daughter was enduring hit me like a physical blow. Sarah, that's too much for one person to handle. You need help. I know, and I'm getting it. I've started going to a support group for caregivers, and Mrs. Henderson offered to sit with you sometimes when I need to run errands or just breathe. What about dating? Having a life of your own? You're 34 years old and you're spending all your time taking care of your sick father. Sarah turned to look at me directly. Dad, do you remember what you did when Mom got sick? I thought back to those terrible months when cancer was slowly stealing my wife away from us. Sarah had been in high school then, and I'd tried to shield her from the worst of it. I took care of her, I said simply. You did more than that. You quit your second job even though we needed the money. You slept in a chair next to her hospital bed for weeks. You learned how to give injections, how to manage her pain medications, how to help her eat when she was too weak to feed herself. You never complained, never made her feel like a burden, never acted like you'd rather be anywhere else. That was different. She was my wife, and you're my father. You taught me that love means showing up, especially when it's hard. You taught me that family takes care of family, no matter what. I'm exactly where I want to be, Dad. If you've ever lived through something like this, leave me a comment telling me which country you're listening from. The love between family members facing illness together is universal, no matter where we are in the world. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light filter through the oak tree's leaves. I felt a strange sense of peace, despite everything. Maybe this was what acceptance looked like, not giving up, but acknowledging the reality of what we were facing and choosing to face it together. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Okay, are you happy? Despite everything that's happening, despite all the responsibility and stress and uncertainty, are you happy? Sarah considered the question seriously. Happy is complicated right now. I'm sad about what's happening to you. I'm scared about the future. I'm exhausted most of the time. But Dad, I'm also grateful. I'm grateful that I can be here for you. I'm grateful for the good days when you're completely yourself. I'm grateful for moments like this, when we can sit together and talk honestly about what we're going through. And I'm grateful for you, I said. Even on the days when I might not remember your name or recognize your face, somewhere deep down, I know you love me. That knowledge goes deeper than memory, Sarah. It lives in a part of me that this disease can't touch. As we walked home, I tried to memorize everything. The way the late afternoon sun made Sarah's hair shine, the sound of her laughter when I told her one of my old work stories, the feeling of her hand in mine as we crossed the street. I didn't know if I'd remember this day tomorrow, but I wanted to try. That evening we did play chess, and slowly the muscle memory came back. I could see the patterns on the board, anticipate Sarah's moves, plan my strategy. For an hour my mind felt sharp and clear and fully my own. Checkmate, I said, moving my queen. Sarah studied the board and laughed. I walked right into that, didn't I? You always were too aggressive with your knights, I said, and suddenly I could remember dozens of chess games we'd played, could see the progression of her skills over the months, could feel the quiet joy of these Sunday afternoon matches. Next week, I'm going to beat you, Sarah declared, starting to put the pieces away. Next week, I agreed, though neither of us could be sure what next week would bring, or whether I'd remember how to play chess, or recognize the daughter who'd been patiently teaching me to accept help and find joy in whatever time we had left. But for tonight, it was enough to know that we were here together, that love was stronger than memory, and that some inheritances, like the bond between a father and daughter, couldn't be stolen by any disease. 3 weeks had passed since what Sarah and I now called the Revelation Day, and I was learning to live with the uncertainty of not knowing which version of myself I'd wake up as each morning. Some days were crystal clear, I could remember our conversations, understand my condition, and feel grateful for Sarah's care. Other days were like trying to navigate through thick fog, where familiar faces looked strange and simple tasks became impossible puzzles. But this morning was different. This morning I woke up angry. I found myself standing in my kitchen at 6 a.m., staring at a pill organizer that I didn't remember filling, next to a note written in handwriting I didn't recognize. The note said, "Good morning, Dad. These are your medications. I'll be back at 8 a.m. Love, Sarah." Sarah. The name meant something, but I couldn't quite grasp what, and why was there a stranger leaving me notes and organizing my pills? The anger built slowly like a kettle coming to boil. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been going through my things, touching my belongings, treating me like I couldn't take care of myself. The note was condescending, written like I was a child who needed instructions for basic tasks. I swept the pills off the counter with my arm, sending them scattering across the kitchen floor. The sound was satisfying, a small rebellion against whatever was happening to me. By the time Sarah arrived, I had worked myself into a rage that felt both foreign and familiar. She walked through the front door using a key to my house that I didn't remember giving her. "Good morning, Dad," she called out, but stopped short when she saw my face. "Oh, it's going to be one of those days. Who the hell are you?" I demanded. "And what are you doing in my house?" Sarah's shoulders sagged, and I saw something that looked like grief flash across her face. But I didn't care about this stranger's emotions. I cared about the violation of my space, my independence. "Dad, I'm Sarah. I'm your daughter. We talked about this." "I don't have a daughter," I interrupted. "I would remember having a daughter. You're some kind of scammer, aren't you? You're here to steal from me. Dad, please look at me. Really look at me. I have Mom's eyes, remember? You always said I had Mom's eyes. But I didn't know who this Mom was supposed to be, and I didn't care about this woman's eyes. All I knew was that a stranger was in my house, claiming to be family, trying to manipulate me with stories I couldn't verify. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house before I call the police. Dad, I can't leave you alone when you're like this. It's not safe." "Safe from what?" "Safe from taking care of myself in my own home. I've been doing just fine without you, whoever you are." Sarah, if that was really her name, pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. It was a photo of me with a young woman who looked like her, both of us smiling at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. "This is us at my nursing school graduation," she said gently. "You were so proud. You told everyone that your daughter was going to save lives." I stared at the photo, trying to find some flicker of recognition, some proof that this wasn't an elaborate con. But the man in the picture felt like a stranger wearing my face. "Anyone can doctor a photo," I said, though doubt was beginning to creep in around the edges of my anger. "Dad, I'm going to call Dr. Chen. She'll explain everything to you again." "I don't need some quack doctor explaining anything to me. I need you out of my house." What happened next still haunts me, even through the fog of memory. Sarah sat down at my kitchen table and began to cry. Not the manipulative tears of someone trying to get their way, but the deep, broken sobs of someone whose heart was shattering in real time. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep losing you over and over again. Every time you forget, every time you look at me like I'm a stranger, it's like you're dying a little bit more, and I have to watch it happen and pretend it doesn't destroy me." Something in her voice, some note of genuine anguish, made me pause. This didn't sound like the calculated manipulation of a con artist. This sounded like someone in real pain. "I love you so much, Dad," she continued through her tears. "I love you enough to let you hate me on the bad days. I love you enough to explain the same things over and over again. I love you enough to give up my own life to take care of you. But I don't know how much more I can take." I found myself sitting down across from her, my anger slowly dissolving into something more complicated. "Why should I believe you?" Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize. Patience mixed with exhaustion, love mixed with heartbreak. "Because," she said simply, "if I were a scammer, would I be here crying over you?" Would I be cleaning up your medications from the floor without complaining? Would I be willing to have this same conversation for the 9th time this month? She stood up and began picking up the scattered pills, sorting them back into their proper compartments. Her movements were practiced, automatic, like she'd done this many times before. "Tell me something only my daughter would know," I said. Sarah paused in her pill gathering and smiled sadly. "When I was 7, I asked you why Mommy had to die. You said that sometimes the best people get called to heaven early because God needs extra angels. I asked if that meant you would die too, since you were the best person I knew. You promised me that you'd stick around as long as I needed you no matter what." The memory hit me like a physical blow, not the visual details, but the emotion of it. The weight of a grieving child in my arms, the desperation to find words that would comfort her, the promise I'd made without understanding what it might cost. "Sarah," I said, and suddenly her name felt right in my mouth. "Yes, Dad, I'm here. I'm sick, aren't I? That's why I can't remember things. That's why you're here." She nodded, settling back into her chair. "You have Alzheimer's disease. Most days you understand what's happening, and we work together to manage it. But some days, like today, the disease makes you forget everything we've talked about." I looked around my kitchen, at the pill organizer, at the notes stuck to the refrigerator, at the calendar marked with doctor's appointments and reminders. Evidence of a life I couldn't quite remember but was clearly living. How long have I been sick? We've known for about 2 years, but looking back, there were signs for longer than that. "And you've been taking care of me this whole time?" "Yes." I felt a crushing wave of shame and gratitude and fear, all rolled together. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I called you a thief. I told you to get out. Dad, stop. This isn't your fault. The disease makes you forget. And when you forget, you get scared. When you get scared, you get angry. It's not the real you talking on days like this." But it felt like the real me. The anger, the suspicion, the fierce independence. Those emotions felt genuine, even if the circumstances that triggered them were based on faulty memory. "What if I hurt you?" I asked. "What if one day I'm not just angry but violent? What if I become dangerous?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Chen says that's unlikely. You're not an aggressive person by nature. But Dad, we need to talk about what happens as this gets worse." "Worse how?" "Eventually, I won't be able to take care of you at home safely. Eventually, you'll need more help than one person can provide." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. I knew what she was talking about. Nursing homes, memory care facilities, places where old people went to die among strangers. "I don't want that," I said quietly. "I know, and we'll put it off as long as possible. But Dad, I need you to understand that when that time comes, it won't be because I'm abandoning you. It'll be because I love you too much to let you suffer when there are people better equipped to help." I thought about this strange woman who claimed to be my daughter, who was my daughter, I reminded myself, and the impossible burden she'd taken on. Here I was, on one of my worst days, having just accused her of being a thief and demanded she leave, and she was still here, still patient, still loving. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever regret it? Taking care of me instead of living your own life?" She considered the question seriously, which I appreciated. "Sometimes I regret that this is happening to you. Sometimes I regret that I can't fix it. Sometimes I regret that I'm not stronger or more patient. But Dad, I've never regretted choosing to be here with you. Never. Why? Because you didn't hesitate when Mom was sick. Because you worked 3 jobs to pay for my college. Because you taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day, especially when it's hard." As the morning progressed, more of my recent memories began to filter back. I remembered the revelation about my finances, the doctor's appointments, the conversations about my condition. It was like watching a movie of my own life, recognizing the events but feeling disconnected from them. Sarah made us lunch, and we ate together in what was becoming a familiar routine, her gently filling in the gaps in my memory, me struggling to hold on to the threads of understanding. "How many times will this happen?" I asked. How many times will I forget who you are? I don't know. Maybe this was the last time. Maybe it'll happen again tomorrow. We take it one day at a time. Aren't you tired of explaining the same things over and over? Sarah smiled, and for the first time that day, it reached her eyes. Dad, when I was little, I made you read Goodnight Moon to me every single night for 2 years. The same book, the same words, the same voices for all the characters. Did you ever get tired of it? I searched my memory and found the echo of those bedtime rituals. A small girl in pajamas, insisting on the familiar comfort of repetition. No, I loved reading to you. Well, this is my turn to love you through the repetition. This is my turn to give you the comfort of familiar words when the world doesn't make sense. That afternoon, something unprecedented happened. Mrs. Henderson came over with a casserole, and instead of the awkward small talk I'd expected, she sat down and began telling me stories about her husband's battle with dementia. She described the good days and the bad days, the small victories and the heartbreaking setbacks, the way love had to evolve and adapt to meet the disease where it was. The hardest part, she said, wasn't watching him forget things. It was watching him forget who he was. But Harold, I want you to know something. Even on his worst days, even when he didn't know my name or remember our 50 years together, he was still the man I fell in love with. The disease took his memories, but it couldn't touch his soul. After she left, I sat with Sarah in the gathering twilight of our living room, feeling more peaceful than I had all day. Sarah? Yes, Dad? Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing me even when I can't see myself. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me take care of you, even when you can't remember why. As I prepared for bed that night, I wrote another note to leave on my bedside table. Today was hard, but Sarah never left. She is your daughter. She loves you. You are safe. I didn't know if tomorrow would bring clarity or confusion, but I knew that whatever version of myself woke up in the morning, he wouldn't be alone. And sometimes, that has to be enough. 6 months later, I was sitting in what the staff called the family room at Sunset Manor Memory Care, watching my daughter arrange flowers in a vase she'd brought from home. The flowers were from Mrs. Henderson's garden. The same tomatoes should be illegal, Mrs. Henderson, though I couldn't always remember why that phrase made me smile. The decision to move me here hadn't been sudden. It had been a series of small surrenders, each one harder than the last. The morning I'd gotten lost in my own neighborhood and been found by police 4 towns away, wearing pajamas and asking for my wife who'd been dead for 20 years. The afternoon I'd left the stove on and nearly set the kitchen on fire. The night I'd fallen in the bathroom and Sarah had found me on the floor at 3 a.m., confused and unable to get up. Dad, I can't keep you safe anymore, she'd said through tears after that last incident. And I can't live with the fear that something terrible will happen to you while I'm at work. I'd wanted to argue, to insist that I was fine, that we could manage. But even in my confusion, I could see the toll this was taking on her. Sarah had lost weight, developed a persistent cough from stress, and had taken so much time off work that her supervisor had gently suggested she consider family medical leave. This place is nice, I said now, watching her fuss with the flower arrangement. It was true. Sunset Manor didn't feel like the sterile nursing home I'd always imagined. The staff was kind. The other residents were, well, they were people like me, fighting the same battle against their own disappearing minds. Dr. Chen helped me find it, Sarah said. She said they specialize in dignity preservation, whatever that means. I was beginning to understand what it meant. The staff here didn't talk down to me or treat me like a child. When I had good days, they let me help in the garden or assist with simple maintenance tasks. When I had bad days, they were patient and gentle, guiding me back to reality without making me feel foolish. Sarah, I said, though sometimes I had to look at her name tag to remember what to call her. Today was a good day, though. Today I knew she was my daughter, knew why I was here, knew that I was dying by degrees. Yes, Dad, I need to tell you something while I still can, while the words are still there. She set down the flowers and gave me her full attention, the way she'd done since she was little. This daughter who'd inherited my stubbornness, my work ethic, and unfortunately, my tendency to bottle up emotions until they exploded. I was wrong about inheritance, I said. All those years, I thought it was about money, about leaving you the house and the savings account and something tangible you could hold on to after I was gone. Sarah nodded, encouraging me to continue. But sitting here, watching you visit me every day even though I sometimes don't remember your name, watching you arrange flowers from a neighbor who brings them because you told her they make me happy, seeing how you've built a life around caring for someone who's disappearing a little more each day, I understand now what I really passed down to you. What's that, Dad? The capacity to love someone, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when there's no reward except the knowledge that you're doing the right thing. I reached for her hand, grateful that the gesture still felt natural. I didn't teach you that by talking about it. I taught you by how I cared for your mother when she was sick, how I showed up for you every day of your childhood, how I chose to keep going even when I wanted to give up. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Dad, you're still teaching me. Every day you face this disease with grace, every time you thank the staff here for their patience, every moment you choose to find joy in small things, despite everything that's been taken from you. You're still showing me how to be strong. There was a knock on the door and Marcus, one of the nursing assistants, peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, but Harold, your friend is here. My friend. I looked at Sarah in confusion, but she was grinning. I may have arranged a surprise, she said. A moment later, Mr. Rodriguez from our old neighborhood walked in carrying a small toolbox. Behind him was Tommy, his teenage grandson, whom I vaguely remembered as the kid who was always hanging around cars. Harold, Mr. Rodriguez called out, ready to get our hands dirty? Apparently, Sarah had arranged for Mr. Rodriguez to bring some of his Camaro restoration project here. Nothing major, just small parts that needed cleaning or simple adjustments that could be done at a table. But as soon as he opened that toolbox and the smell of motor oil and metal polish hit my nose, something came alive in me that I'd thought was lost forever. This is a carburetor from a '69 Camaro SS, Mr. Rodriguez explained to Tommy, but he was looking at me. Harold here is the best mechanic I've ever known. He can rebuild one of these blindfolded. My hands seemed to remember what my mind sometimes forgot. I picked up the carburetor components, felt their weight, understood their purpose. For the next hour, I was fully myself again. Not Harold the dementia patient, but Harold the mechanic, the problem solver, the man who could fix things. Grandpa says you taught him everything he knows about engines, Tommy said shyly. Did I? I looked at Mr. Rodriguez, genuinely surprised. Every Saturday for the past 3 years, you never made me feel stupid for asking the same questions over and over. You just kept teaching me until it stuck. As we worked, other residents began to gather around our table. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been a seamstress, started telling stories about fixing things. Mr. Chen began talking about carpentry. Even Mrs. Williams, who rarely spoke anymore, seemed engaged by the activity and the conversation. You see what you did? Sarah whispered to me. You created this. You brought people together around the idea that everyone has something valuable to contribute, no matter what limitations they might have. Where are you watching this story from? I'd love to know which city you're joining me from as we reach the end of Harold and Sarah's journey together. Later that evening, after our visitors had gone and the dinner dishes had been cleared away, Sarah and I sat in the small garden behind the memory care unit. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of something, though I couldn't quite place what. Sarah, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think I'm still me? Even with all the forgetting, all the confusion, all the times I don't recognize you, am I still your father? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching a cardinal land on the bird bath near our bench. Dad, remember what you told me after Mom died? When I was scared that I wouldn't remember her voice or her laugh, I shook my head. So many memories were gone now, lost in the fog that seemed to grow thicker each day. You said that the most important parts of people don't live in our memories. They live in our hearts, in our actions, in the way we treat other people. You said Mom would always be part of me because she taught me how to be kind, how to be strong, how to love deeply. That sounds like something I would say. Well, Dad, you're still you for the same reason Mom is still with us. Because the best parts of who you are, your kindness, your generosity, your determination to keep going even when things are hard, those things aren't stored in your memory. They're woven into your character. The disease can take your words, but it can't touch your soul. As if to prove her point, I noticed that Mr. Chen from down the hall was sitting alone on another bench looking lost and sad. Without thinking about it, I walked over and sat down next to him. "Beautiful evening," I said, though I couldn't remember his name or why he looked familiar. He smiled and nodded. "My wife used to love sunsets like this." "Mine too," I said, though I couldn't picture her face anymore. I think they're still watching them with us, somehow." Mr. Chen's smile grew wider. "I think you're right. When I returned to Sarah, she was crying again, but these were different tears than the ones I'd seen so many times before. These looked like tears of recognition, of gratitude, of something that might have been peace." "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong, Dad. Everything's exactly right. You just proved my point." "What point?" "That Alzheimer's can steal a lot of things, but it can't steal who you really are. You saw someone who was hurting, and your instinct was to offer comfort. That's not memory, Dad. That's character. That's the inheritance you really gave me." As we made our way back inside, I tried to hold on to this moment, the feeling of being useful, of being loved, of being seen as more than just a collection of symptoms and deficits. I tried to memorize Sarah's face, the sound of her laugh, the way she looked at me like I was still worth something despite everything this disease had taken. I knew there would be darker days ahead. Days when I wouldn't remember her name or understand where I was. Days when the confusion would be so complete that I might not even recognize myself in the mirror. But tonight, I understood something that felt important. Love doesn't require memory to survive. "Sarah?" "Yes, Dad. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you've become, the choices you've made, the way you've cared for me. Even when I can't remember why I'm proud, somewhere deep down, that pride will still be there. And I'm proud of you too, Dad. I'm proud of how you're facing this disease. I'm proud of the legacy you've created, not just in me, but in everyone whose life you've touched." As I prepared for bed that night in my small room at Sunset Manor, I realized I didn't need to write myself a note anymore. The important things, the love, the gratitude, the understanding that I was not alone, those truths lived deeper than memory could reach. I had spent my whole life thinking that inheritance was something you left behind when you died. But lying there in the darkness, surrounded by the quiet sounds of people like me fighting their own battles against forgetting, I understood that the most valuable inheritance is something you give while you're still alive. I had given Sarah the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally. I had given her the strength to face impossible challenges with grace. I had given her the understanding that some things, like the bond between a father and daughter, are stronger than any disease. And in return, she had given me the gift of dignity in the face of loss, purpose in the midst of confusion, and the certainty that no matter what tomorrow might steal from my mind, today I had been fully and completely loved. That, I realized, was the true inheritance. Not money or property or things that could be stolen or lost, but the eternal truth that we had chosen to love each other through the best and worst of times. And that truth would outlive both of us, passed down through generations like the most precious family heirloom. Even if I couldn't always remember it, somewhere in the deepest part of who I was, I would always know I had been a father. I had been loved, I had mattered, and that was enough.